And good evening to everybody on this fine and fabulous evening. Welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. And as you know, we've been dodging around varying countries of the world looking at their specific ghosts, cryptids, and strange and supernatural creatures. And I thought it might be quite interesting in this episode to do something a little bit different. I was planning and plotting on doing the ghosts and cryptids of Portugal, but I found it very, very interesting to discover that a comment made by a viewer who often joins our channel and sometimes does lives with us made me go and do a little bit of extra research, and it led me to come across some very, very interesting things. And I thought, you know what? This is where we're going this evening. So much thanks to the Emperor's son for the ideas. I hope he joins us this evening. So it looks like we're going to have an interesting one, if nothing else. So you may or may not know, but I was a friar in the Catholic Church for 9 years and was in fact trained as a priest before I left the church. And in that time, of course, I studied philosophy and theology and the teachings of the Catholic Church, Christianity, and all of the things from that side. Hi there, Christian. Hi there, Simke. But amongst other things, I also took a certain amount of time to study up and learn about other religions, which fascinated me. And of course, one has to cover the major religions, at least in part. So I have, in fact, read parts of the Quran and the Muslim faith and such like, as well as several others. But it was several years ago, and I went back to have a look at some of the beliefs and ideas found within the Islamic traditions. And I found something very, very interesting that was brought up in the last live between myself and the Emperor's son, that in the Catholic Church, there is absolutely a belief in the existence of demons and such like, and evil spirits and so forth. But there is also absolutely almost never any teaching about it at all. They sort of how was it put? The Emperor's son said it very nicely. They basically say, see that's bad, don't go there, and then never tell you anything about it ever again. And that's absolutely true. And he himself is a follower of Islam, and he said it's exactly the same. There are, within the canonical belief, a whole lot of teachings that they basically say, this is bad, don't go there, and they never tell you anything else about it, which I find to be really, really strange. The only major religion that I've come across that seems to not have a problem with teaching both the good and the bad on both sides is Hinduism, which I find very interesting. And perhaps we have to say that, at least in terms of the human emotional side of these things. Hey, the Emperor's Son, welcome, welcome. Um, Listen up, because this podcast is for you today. Um, so the interesting thing is that they seem to be more emotionally aware of the dangers that their religion says exists, um, and will teach it, whereas many of the other religions just don't, which I find very strange indeed. Um, and as I say, the Emperor's Son did agree that it's totally true to say that that's a common theme. So we're going to dive into today the cryptids and ghosts of Saudi Arabia. And of course, Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country. And I got to tell you, there's some fascinating things that have come out of my research into this. And I think this edition is going to be a fabulous one. So, welcome, welcome to the Emperor's Son. How are you doing this evening? I think he's struggling to connect still, but let's get started. And where we're going to begin is with some of the ghosts, um, which I've got to say have proved to be interesting. Um, Now, we need to have a quick talk about Saudi Arabia as a country, just briefly geographically. It is an intensely dry country. There are portions that are less so, but a great deal of it is um, deserts and all of that kind of thing. And it's the kind of place where the oases and wherever there is water are obviously much more habitable and are very important as meeting places and trade places and what have you, just by the nature of the place itself. Um, it's an amazing countryside, and I've got to say it's stunningly beautiful in its own way. Um, Obviously, very dry, very brown, a lot like large portions of South Africa. So, uh, just sending a quick message to the Emperor's Son. I think he's struggling to connect, and I would like him to for this one. So, we are looking at a country that is mostly Muslim. Um, it's been so for a very long time and has a great deal of history and all kinds of mythology, which really is wonderful, amazing traditions, and an amazing people as well, which I think is great. But now let's start off with the ghosts. Now there isn't really a top 10 list for Saudi Arabian folklore, but they do have a number of fascinatingly creepy um, creatures, which is very pleasing in that regard. And one of the um, first ones, which I think is perhaps quite funny in some ways, and which I do enjoy. Hey Diza, is the Humar al Kaila, which translates as the midday donkey. I'm sure that the Emperor's Son can correct my pronunciation, which I will probably mangle. Uh, Hey Oko Kimaru. Um, Now, the midday donkey is a half human, half donkey creature that, unlike most ghosts, rather strangely, appears at midday rather than after dark, and it is definitely feral and evil, and its intention is to cause harm. So something to avoid at all costs. A strange sort of a ghost in many ways. And we're going to get onto that because the distinction between ghosts and other things sometimes becomes a little blurred in the mythology and in the stories. So it gives a different view of things. Another very interesting one, which I find particularly pleasingly revolting, if you will, is the al Saf or the Al Layl, which is a story about kind of a witch, so sort of a ghost, sort of a witch, halfway between maybe a witch who became a ghost, but is known as the mother of cockroaches. And she's known for bringing foulness and